The apartment on Maple Street. I moved into the apartment on Maple Street in September of 2019. It was a small building, 4 units, 2 upstairs, 2 downstairs. Mine was upstairs on the right. The rent was cheap for the area, and the landlord didn't ask many questions. I needed a place quickly. It seemed perfect. The building was old but maintained. Hardwood floors, high ceilings, big windows that let in good light. My neighbors were quiet. I'd see them occasionally in the hallway or the parking lot. We'd nod, sometimes say hello. That was it. The woman in the unit below mine was named Sarah. I knew because her name was on the mailbox. I'd hear her sometimes through the floor. Footsteps, the sound of cabinets opening and closing. Normal apartment sounds. She kept to herself. I appreciated that. The couple across the hall were younger, maybe mid-20s. I never learned their names. They'd leave for work early and come home late. I'd hear their door open and close, the muffled sound of their television through the wall. They seemed like good neighbors, considerate, quiet. The 4th unit, downstairs across from Sarah, stayed empty the entire time I lived there. The landlord said he was renovating it. I never saw anyone working on it. The door stayed closed, the windows stayed dark. I settled into a routine quickly. I worked from home, so I spent most of my time in the apartment. I'd make coffee in the morning, work at my desk by the window, take breaks to walk around the neighborhood. In the evenings, I'd cook dinner and read. It was peaceful, exactly what I needed after leaving my last place. About a month after I moved in, I started noticing the sounds. It was always at night, always between 2 and 3 a.m. I'd wake up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway, slow, deliberate. They'd walk from one end of the hall to the other, then stop, then walk back. This would go on for maybe 10 minutes, then silence. At first, I assumed it was one of my neighbors, maybe someone who couldn't sleep, maybe someone checking their car. But it happened every night, same time, same pattern, and it always stopped at my door. I'd hear the footsteps approach. They'd stop right outside my door. I'd wait, listening. After a moment, they'd continue down the hall, then come back, stop at my door again. This happened 3 or 4 times each night. I never looked through the peephole. I told myself I didn't want to be rude, but that wasn't really why. Something about the footsteps made me uneasy. The rhythm was too regular, too precise. One night, I decided to check. I got out of bed when I heard the footsteps start. I walked to the door quietly. I waited until the footsteps stopped outside. Then I looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. I could still hear the footsteps. They were right outside my door, but there was no one there. I watched for maybe 30 seconds. The footsteps continued, walking away, coming back, but I couldn't see anyone. I stepped back from the door. I went back to bed. I didn't sleep well after that. The next morning, I ran into Sarah in the parking lot. I asked her if she'd heard anything unusual at night. She looked at me for a moment, then she said no. She said she slept with earplugs. She got in her car and left. I started paying more attention to my neighbors after that. I'd listen for sounds from their apartments. I'd watch for them coming and going. But everything seemed normal. Sarah left for work at 8 a.m. every day, came home at 6 p.m. The couple across the hall kept their same schedule. Everything was routine, predictable. Except the footsteps. Those continued every night. In November, I noticed Sarah's car was gone. It wasn't in her usual spot. I figured she was away for the weekend, but Monday came and her car still wasn't there. Tuesday, Wednesday. By Friday, I realized I hadn't seen her in a week. Her apartment was quiet, no footsteps below me, no sounds at all. I thought maybe she'd moved out, but her name was still on the mailbox. Her curtains were still in the windows. I asked the landlord about it when he came to collect rent. He said Sarah was fine. She'd paid for the month. That was all he said. Another week passed, still no sign of her. The apartment below me stayed silent. I started to feel uneasy about it, not because I knew Sarah well, I didn't, but because she'd just disappeared. No moving truck, no goodbye, just gone. The footsteps in the hallway continued, every night, same time, but now they were louder, more insistent. They'd stop at my door for longer. Sometimes I'd hear what sounded like breathing, just on the other side of the door. I started sleeping with headphones, white noise. It helped, but I'd still wake up sometimes and know the footsteps were happening. I could feel them, the vibration through the floor. In December, the couple across the hall disappeared. I noticed because their door stayed closed for several days. No sounds from their apartment, no car in the parking lot. I knocked on their door one evening. No answer. I tried again the next day. Still nothing. I asked the landlord again. He said they'd moved out, paid through the end of the month, and left. I asked when. He said he didn't remember exactly. Maybe a week ago, maybe 2. But I'd seen them. I was sure of it. I'd heard their door open and close. I'd heard their television. Unless I was mistaken. Unless I was remembering wrong. I started keeping track after that. I'd write down when I heard sounds from the other apartments, when I saw my neighbors, what time, what they were doing. I needed to know I wasn't imagining things. The problem was, I couldn't remember the last time I'd actually seen anyone. I'd heard them, I was sure of that, but seen them? I couldn't pinpoint a specific day, a specific moment. It had been weeks, maybe longer. The building felt empty, but it couldn't be empty. I was paying rent, the landlord came by, the mailboxes had names on them. People lived here, they had to. The footsteps got worse. They started earlier, lasted longer. Sometimes they'd go on for hours, walking back and forth, stopping at my door, waiting, moving on, coming back. I started leaving the apartment during the day. I'd work from coffee shops, libraries, anywhere but there. But I had to come back eventually. I had to sleep there. One night in late December, I woke up to silence. No footsteps, no sounds from the other apartments, nothing. The building was completely quiet. I got up, I walked to the window. The parking lot was empty, except for my car. I went to the door. I looked through the peephole. The hallway was dark. The lights were off. They were always on. The landlord kept them on 24/7, but now they were off. I opened my door slowly. The hallway was dark, cold. I reached for the light switch. Nothing happened. I flipped it several times. The lights stayed off. I stepped into the hallway. My eyes adjusted to the darkness. I could see the other doors, Sarah's apartment, the couple's apartment, the empty unit downstairs. All the doors were open, not wide open, just slightly ajar, like someone had been inside and left in a hurry. I walked to Sarah's door. I pushed it open. The apartment was empty. No furniture, no curtains, nothing, just bare walls and floors, like no one had ever lived there. I checked the couple's apartment. Same thing. Empty, completely empty. The 4th unit, downstairs across from Sarah, just sitting there for years. I recognized some of the items. A lamp that looked like one Sarah had. I'd seen it through her window. A jacket hanging on a hook that looked like the one the guy across the hall wore. A coffee mug on the counter that I'm almost certain I'd seen the woman carrying. I left the apartment. I went back upstairs. I locked my door. I sat on my bed. I tried to make sense of it, but nothing made sense. The apartments were empty, but I'd heard people. I'd seen lights on. I'd heard televisions and footsteps and doors closing. Unless I hadn't. Unless I'd been alone the entire time. I didn't sleep that night. When morning came, I went downstairs. The doors to the other apartments were closed again, locked. The lights in the hallway were back on. Everything looked normal. I went to my car. I sat in the driver's seat. I thought about leaving, just driving away, finding another place, but I'd signed a lease. I'd paid first and last month rent. I couldn't afford to lose that money. I went back inside. I made coffee. I tried to work, but I couldn't focus. I kept listening, waiting for sounds from the other apartments, but there was nothing, just silence. That afternoon, the landlord came by. I asked him about the other tenants. He looked confused. He said there were no other tenants. The building was being renovated. I was the only one living there, had been since I moved in. I showed him the mailboxes, the names. He looked at them, then he looked at me. He said those were old labels from previous tenants. He'd been meaning to remove them. I asked about Sarah, about the couple. He said he didn't know who I was talking about. He said the units had been empty for months. He was renovating them. That's why the rent was so cheap. I was helping him keep the building occupied while he worked on it. I wanted to argue, to show him I wasn't crazy, but I couldn't prove anything. I had no pictures, no recordings, just memories. And memories can be wrong. The landlord left. I stood in the hallway. I looked at the other doors. Were they empty? Had they always been empty? I didn't know anymore. That night, the footsteps started again. 2 a.m., like clockwork, walking up and down the hallway, stopping at my door. But this time, I didn't stay in bed. I got up, I went to the door, I looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, but the footsteps continued right outside my door. I could hear them clearly, heavy, deliberate. They reached my doorway. They stopped. I looked at the doorway. There was no one there, but I could feel something, a presence, standing right there, watching me. I couldn't see it, but it was there. It had always been there. I closed the door. I locked it. I pushed my dresser against it. I spent the rest of the night sitting in the corner of my room, listening to footsteps that came from nowhere and watching a door that something kept trying to open. I stayed in that apartment for 3 more months. I couldn't break the lease. The landlord wouldn't let me. Every night, the footsteps came. Every morning, the building was empty, just me and the sound of people who weren't there. I moved out in March. I found someone to take over my lease. I helped them move in. I showed them around. I told them the building was quiet, safe, a good place. I didn't tell them about the footsteps. I didn't tell them about the empty apartments. I didn't tell them they'd be the only person living there. I drove by that building last week. There was a car in the parking lot I didn't recognize. Someone new. Someone who doesn't know yet. The lights in my old apartment were on. I could see a figure moving past the window, back and forth, regular, precise, like they were pacing, like they were waiting for something. I didn't stop. I kept driving, but I still think about that building, about Sarah, about the couple across the hall, about an apartment full of their belongings, gathering dust in a unit that was never really empty. And I wonder if they knew, if they heard the footsteps too, if they stayed too long, just like I almost did. I wonder if they ever really left at all.